Every popular image of British warfare shows red-coated soldiers firing in disciplined volleys, standing shoulder to shoulder, winning battles through drill and tradition. History tells us British power rested on formations, flags, and empire-spanning logistics. But that story is incomplete, because one weapon quietly rewrote how British soldiers fought, survived, and killed. And it did so not through elegance or prestige, but through speed, simplicity, and ruthless practicality. This is the story of the Lee-Enfield rifle, the weapon that forever changed British warfare, not by looking revolutionary on paper, but by transforming what a single infantryman could do when everything fell apart. To understand why that matters, you have to rewind to the late 19th century, when Britain ruled the largest empire the world had ever seen, yet faced a growing and deeply uncomfortable truth. The battlefield was changing faster than tradition could keep up. Industrialized warfare meant longer ranges, smokeless powder, higher rates of fire, and enemies who no longer fought in neat lines. The British Army, proud and experienced, was also conservative. It had won wars with discipline and drill, and it believed those virtues would always be enough. They weren't. By the 1880s and 1890s, European armies were abandoning single-shot rifles for magazine-fed bolt actions. Germany fielded the Gewehr 88, then the Mauser 98. France adopted the Lebel, firing small-caliber smokeless cartridges at unprecedented velocity. These rifles allowed soldiers to fire faster, reload quicker, and fight effectively from cover. Britain, however, stumbled forward through a series of compromises. The Martini-Henry, famous from colonial wars, was powerful but slow. The Lee-Metford introduced a bolt and magazine, but struggled with barrel wear under new smokeless ammunition. The problem wasn't just technical, it was philosophical. British officers still believed controlled volleys, fired on command, were superior to rapid individual fire. Speed was seen as wasteful. Ammunition discipline mattered more than firepower. On paper, that logic made sense. In practice, it nearly got British soldiers killed. The turning point came not in Europe, but in South Africa during the Second Boer War, which began in 1999. The Boers were not a modern industrial army, but they possessed something the British underestimated: excellent marksmanship, intimate knowledge of terrain, and modern Mauser rifles chambered in 7x57 millimeters. These rifles fired flatter, farther, and more accurately than many British weapons, and the Boers used them from concealed positions, picking off red-coated troops advancing in open ground. British soldiers found themselves under devastating fire from enemies they could barely see. Traditional tactics collapsed. Officers were shot early, units pinned down, casualties mounted. The Empire won the war eventually, but the cost was shocking, and the lesson was unavoidable. The British infantrymen needed a rifle that could dominate modern combat, not just look good on parade. Out of this reckoning emerged the short magazine Lee-Enfield, officially adopted in 1903. The name itself hinted at its purpose. Short did not mean inferior, it meant a compromised length suitable for both infantry and cavalry. Magazine emphasized its defining feature, a detachable box magazine holding 10 rounds, double the capacity of most contemporary rifles. And Lee-Enfield reflected the marriage of James Paris Lee's bolt-action system with the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield. On paper, the rifle was unremarkable. It fired the .303 British cartridge, a rimmed round that was already considered old-fashioned by some continental designers. Its effective range was listed at around 500 yards for point targets, though trained marksmen could reach much farther. It weighed just under 9 pounds unloaded. Nothing about it screamed revolution. But here's where it gets interesting. The Lee-Enfield was designed not to be the most accurate rifle in the world, nor the most powerful. It was designed to be the fastest bolt-action battle rifle ever issued to a mass army. The secret lay in its bolt. Unlike the Mauser system, which locked at the front, the Lee-Enfield locked at the rear. This allowed a shorter bolt throw and smoother cycling. Combined with a cock-on closing mechanism, the rifle could be worked incredibly quickly with minimal disruption to aim. British doctrine leaned into this, developing an almost unbelievable standard of training known as the Mad Minute. A trained British infantryman was expected to fire 15 aimed rounds in 60 seconds at a target 300 yards away. Many could do far more. Contemporary accounts describe soldiers firing 20 to 30 accurate shots per minute, using stripper clips to recharge the magazine while keeping rounds chambered. In combat, this meant something extraordinary. A single platoon could produce the volume of fire of a machine gun section. The numbers tell the story. Most German soldiers armed with the Mauser 98 could manage perhaps 10 to 12 aimed shots per minute under ideal conditions. The Lee Enfield doubled that. Do the math across a company, and the battlefield equation changes dramatically. The first real test of this weapon came almost immediately, in August 1914, on the fields of Belgium and northern France. The British Expeditionary Force was small, professional, and vastly outnumbered. Facing them were mass conscript armies of Imperial Germany, confident in numbers, artillery, and aggressive doctrine. Picture this scenario. It is August 23, 1914, near the Belgian town of Mons. The weather is warm. The air is heavy with dust and tension. British troops from the 4th Battalion Royal Fusiliers dig in along the Mons-Condé Canal. They are outnumbered at least 3 to 1. German infantry advance in dense formations, believing they face only light resistance. When the Germans come within range, the British open fire. To the German soldiers, it sounds like machine guns. Reports later describe intense, continuous fire, ripping through advancing ranks. German officers order their men to ground, convinced they have encountered entrenched automatic weapons. In reality, it's disciplined rifle fire, delivered by men trained to exploit every advantage of the Lee Enfield. One German officer would later write that British fire at Mons was as rapid and destructive as that of machine guns. The effect is devastating. German units stall, falter, and suffer heavy casualties before artillery and overwhelming numbers force the British to withdraw. This pattern repeats again and again during the retreat from Mons. At Le Cateau on August 26th, British forces stand and fight against crushing odds. Units like the 2nd Battalion Royal Scots and the Middlesex Regiment unleash rapid, accurate fire that slows entire German divisions. The Lee Enfield doesn't win the campaign, but it prevents annihilation. It buys time. It keeps a small army alive long enough to matter. On paper, the rifle was just a tool. In practice, it became a force multiplier. As the war dragged on and trenches scarred the landscape, the Lee Enfield adapted. Mud, rain, and filth choked weapons across the Western Front. Many rifles failed under these conditions. The Lee Enfield, with its generous tolerances, kept working. It could be dirty and still function. Soldiers learned to trust it with their lives. Listen to the human element here. British soldiers wrote home praising their rifles. One infantryman noted that even after days in waterlogged trenches, his rifle would still fire when needed. Another described the comfort of knowing he could deliver rapid fire during a German assault, even if machine guns were knocked out. Training reinforced this bond. British musketry before the war was among the best in the world. Recruits spent endless hours on ranges, mastering rapid fire, snap shooting, and range estimation. The Lee Enfield was not just issued, it was integrated into a culture of marksmanship that treated the individual soldier as a critical component to firepower. The rifle saw action across every theater of the First World War. In Gallipoli, British and Anzac troops fought Ottoman defenders in brutal close combat, where quick handling and fast follow-up shots mattered more than long-range precision. In Mesopotamia, the rifle endured heat and dust that would cripple lesser designs. In East Africa, it faced guerrilla warfare under extreme conditions. By 1916, the rifle had evolved into the SMLE Mark III Star, simplified for mass production. Volley sights were removed. fine adjustments gave way to speed. Britain produced millions of Lee Enfields during the war, arming not just British troops, but forces across the empire. Yet the irony is, as the war progressed, the battlefield increasingly favored machine guns, artillery, and eventually tanks. The individual rifleman seemed less central than ever. And yet, whenever battles devolved into chaos, when lines broke, when assaults stalled, when patrols clashed in no man's land, the rifleman and his Lee Enfield still decided outcomes. Fast forward to the interwar years, and the Lee Enfield did something unusual. It refused to become obsolete. While other nations experimented with semi-automatic rifles, Britain stuck with what worked. Improvements led to the No. 4 Mark I, introduced during the Second World War. It featured a heavier barrel, improved sights, and simpler manufacturing. Again, on paper, it looked conservative. In practice, it was lethal. Picture another scene. It is May 1940, northern France. The German blitzkrieg smashes through Allied lines. British units fight desperate rearguard actions during the retreat to Dunkirk. In villages, hedgerows, and roadblocks, Lee Enfields crack again and again. German troops, advancing aggressively, encounter unexpectedly heavy fire from small British units. Once more, reports describe machine gun-like resistance that slows advances and inflicts losses out of proportion to numbers. In North Africa, the rifle faced dust storms and extreme heat. In Burma, it fought jungle warfare, where visibility was measured in yards, not miles. The Lee Enfield's fast handling and 10-round magazine proved invaluable in close encounters with Japanese forces, who emphasized speed and aggression. British and Commonwealth troops could deliver rapid, controlled fire that broke attacks and held positions. The technical reasons mattered. The .303 cartridge delivered adequate stopping power. The rifle's length balanced stability with maneuverability. The rear-locking bolt allowed rapid cycling. The magazine capacity reduced reload frequency in firefights. None of these features alone were revolutionary. Together, they reshaped British infantry combat. Comparison makes this clearer. The German Kar-98K was more accurate at long range and fired a powerful 7.92 mm cartridge, but its 5-round magazine and slower bolt cycle limited sustained fire. The American M1 Garand, a semi-automatic, would eventually surpass both in rate of fire, but Britain did not field it. Instead, British doctrine leaned into training, making the Lee Enfield an extension of the soldier. Production numbers underline its impact. Over 17 million Lee Enfields were produced across various marks. They armed British forces from 1903 into the late 1950s, seeing service in 2 world wars, Korea, and countless colonial conflicts. And here is the deeper irony. The rifle that forever changed British warfare did not usher in a new age of technology. It preserved something older, but made it viable in a modern world. It ensured that the individual soldier, properly trained, remained a decisive factor even as war industrialized. There were moral complications too. The Lee Enfield enforced imperial power in colonies. It was used in brutal counterinsurgency campaigns. It was carried by soldiers enforcing policies that today are heavily criticized. The weapon itself was neutral. The history it served was not. After the Second World War, the rifle lingered. British forces experimented with new designs, but the Lee Enfield refused to disappear quietly. Sniper variants remained in service for decades. Commonwealth nations adopted and adapted it. Even today, it appears in conflicts far removed from its origins, a testament to its durability and design. So what does this story reveal about warfare? That change does not always come from radical innovation. Sometimes it comes from perfecting fundamentals, from understanding how soldiers actually fight when plans collapse and fear takes over.
The Lee Enfield did not promise victory. It offered something more valuable: control in chaos. Every image of British warfare might show flags and formations, but behind those images was a rifle that allowed ordinary soldiers to stand against overwhelming odds and make their presence felt. That is why this weapon did not just serve British warfare, it reshaped it.